How about you? I'm Hank. Welcome to Hamiltonville Farm. I don't have any idea what I'm doing. I'm gonna film it anyway. I've been using that tagline the last couple of videos for you guys to check out. I think it's hilarious. But anyway, so today I want to talk about 5 reasons why I love my classic truck, my OBS Ford, or 5 reasons why you should consider buying an older truck versus a newer truck. So these are the 5 reasons. I've got a 1995 7.3 liter Power Stroke diesel. It's on a 2-wheel drive, crew cab, dually chassis. It's got a 1-wheel slip in the back, or 1-wheel peel as they say, in the back for the differential. It's got power windows, power locks. None of those work. I've got a lot of electrical issues with it, but the motor and the trans are really good. If you haven't seen the video of me actually bringing the truck back from, I bought it from a used car lot, which, you know, some people have opinions on that, but if you haven't seen that video of me actually bringing the truck 300 miles home when I bought it, I'll link it right here. You can take a look at it. Let's go over 5 reasons why you should buy a classic truck. Okay, the first reason is there's no computer stuff on it, or very little to no computer stuff on it. Now the 95 may have some computer type programming on it, but you get into the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, they're not going to have a bunch of computer stuff on it, if any. And if that's the case, then you can usually troubleshoot problems pretty quickly. Now this does have the capability to put an OBD scanner on it. And but the older you get, like the 60s, 70s, and 80s models, you know, you're not going to be able to use like engine scanning tools and things like that. So that means, in my opinion, that's a good thing, because you don't have, like I have electrical problems in this truck. I've got wiring problems where my windows don't work, my power locks don't work, my fuel gauge doesn't work, temp gauge doesn't work. But guess what? I can figure all that out because I know that there's a wire that's running from a power source to a fuse or relay to the unit that needs to be powered to operate. And in between there's a disconnect somewhere. That's it. I don't have to worry about, once I find the issue where I have a wire that's going from, let's say, the battery to the window control, the power window switch, right? I know there's things in between there, but for simplicity's sake, if you have a wire that goes from the 12-volt power supply to the power window switch, that wire has a break in it somewhere. All I got to do is find that break, boom, done, fixed, fix the break. Now my windows should be working if the engine motor works, right? Or if the window motor crank works. So, and to me, that's a big plus. That's a big benefit, because I ain't got to go around and let's say I've got a power window that I found a short in the wire. So I've got a wire feeding my power supply to my window crank unit, my power window crank unit, and it's got a short in it. Well, if I replace that wire and my car has a computer on it, maybe I have to replace the wire and flash my computer, you know, or update the software in the computer to tell the window to work. That's just a pain. So you can avoid all that headache by buying a classic truck or an older vehicle that doesn't have all the computer stuff in it, and you can simply wire the engine, or wire the power source and the unit that you need to power. And that is going to be a big thing. And anything goes wrong in this truck, it's mechanical. I can change the parts out, take off one part, put the new part on, unplug this, plug this back in, and the new part will work without me having to go into a laptop to try to figure it out. Once you start getting into laptop type mechanicking, your rates just go through the roof, you know what I mean? So it may be a 20-minute job, but the book time on it may be $300 or something, because the computer you have to flash the computer and all that good stuff. So my number 1 reason why I love my 1995 OBS 7.3 Power Stroke diesel is because it doesn't have a bunch of computer stuff on it. Let's talk about the other 4 reasons why I think you should buy, or why I love my classic truck. The second reason why I think you should buy a classic truck, or a older vehicle, if you will, we're going to just say classic truck from the rest of the video so I don't have to keep changing back and forth. But the second reason why I think you should buy a classic truck is because of the parts availability and the cost of those said parts. So there's all kind of companies, there's all kind of aftermarket companies out there that are selling parts for your classic truck. Square body Chevys, OBS Fords, Broncos, 12 valve Cummins, you name it, first gen Dodges, right? There's companies out there that specialize in selling every nut and bolt from bumper to bumper. And I'm not sponsored by any of these companies, but there's a couple that come to mind. There's thousands of them out there. But just a couple that come off right off the top of my mind is LMC Truck. They have everything that you have from bumper to bumper. CP Addict has a bunch of stuff. Summit Racing has a bunch of stuff. Diesel Parts has a lot of stuff. I mean, so there's companies out there that specialize in this stuff. So parts availability, you can find them. I mean, way back into the 50s and 60s. So, you know, if you have a 60s model truck and you're wanting to get a bench seat for the front, or the, you know, if you got 3 on the tree and you're looking for a shifter knob, you can get that pretty easy, and they're fairly cheap. If you want to go with some aftermarket stuff that is from overseas, then you can find seats for this 95 Ford, $200. So far I've replaced, or I bought the window switch, cheap aftermarket window switch. I think it was like 20 something bucks, right? The chicken lights I put up there, they were 80 bucks, I think it was. So I mean, I got less than 200 bucks in that little kit that I bought. So, you know, so relatively speaking, there's junkyards that are full of this, pick and pull places that are full of parts that you can find. Let's say I'm driving down the road and this 7.3 liter, this is the Power Stroke. So let's say I need an H-pop or some type of fuel pump for it or whatever. They're everywhere. I can find them online, or I can get go to a junkyard and find them. And the good thing about it is, like, this is a perfect example. This engine actually came out of an ambulance. So they're interchangeable. So the wiring harnesses on this thing, I can look for a Power Stroke, an OBS Ford Power Stroke wiring harness, or there's some sedans, some Ford sedans, maybe some LTDs or something like that. And I'm not sure that's the case, but there's so much that can interchange. You can swap things with them. You can put Cummins engine. You know, you've heard people say the Fummins, right? The Ford with the Cummins in it. So there's the parts are available. They're easy to swap out, and they're normally cheap, or I should say inexpensive. Now you do have some cheap parts, but they're normally inexpensive. Doesn't take a lot, and it doesn't take a lot of know-how to take one part off, put one part on. For my IPR valve, I got a video of me that I had to tighten up my IPR valve. I thought about that, and I got on the computer, and we're going to talk more about this in point 3, but I got on the computer and I found out that the problem I was having was probably my IPR valve. I got down, I looked, sure enough, that's what it was. Guess how much it cost me to fix it? $0, right? And I'll tell you why here in a second. But it's the parts availability, the parts cost. For an OBS truck or a classic truck, normally they're available and they're inexpensive. So that's a huge reason. I mean, compare that to, my wife had a sedan that the front, she had an accident, and she had the fiberglass on the front bumper just cracked, just a small crack in it. And they had to replace the bumper, the headlight. I mean, it was just ridiculous what all they replaced on that thing. And it was like $1,700 for all that. And it's just, you know, when you're doing something like this, especially, now, okay, let me back up some. Show trucks and stuff like that, that's a little different. You're going to be buying, you know, the billet type stuff, and that's going to run you some money. But if you're going to have a old farm, I mean, look at the underside of this hood, right? It ain't going to win no truck show, right? But I got a farm truck. I've got a work truck. So, and when you're using these old classic type vehicles like this, you're either gonna put them in a show or you're gonna work them. That's what you're gonna do. We're all hard-working people. We're all, dollars are hard to come by nowadays. So, having an older type vehicle where you can buy parts inexpensive and you can pull out and replace pretty quickly, that's a big deal compared to some of these newer generation vehicles that are computer controlled and the parts are super, super expensive. So now that's 2 points that I've talked about. Let's move on to point 3 of why OBS or classic type vehicles are the way to go. All right, moving on to point 3. The first point was doesn't have computer stuff on it. Second point was that the parts availability and the price of those parts. The third point of why you should buy a classic vehicle is because you have a bunch of corporate knowledge on the internet. There's all kind of forums, there's all kind of help pages. I want to tell you, I mentioned earlier in the video about my IPR valve. So take a look at this, right? From what I understand, I'm pretty stoked to be able to have a cover on my engine. It's just a little side note there, but so when I had an issue with my IPR valve or had an issue with my truck, I got on the computer on a forum, and these guys were telling me about the IPR valve down in here. And they said that, hey, listen, you might be able to look under here and see that the nut has worked itself loose off your IPR valve. And sure enough, wouldn't you believe it, that nut was stuck in the valley of this engine block. And so all I had to do, get a magnet, get that nut back up here, put my IPR valve back together, and now my truck runs great. So it's just stuff like that. It's that corporate knowledge that you can find in forums where people can tell you how to fix things and it not cost you any money. You can't do that on a 2019 Cadillac Escalade. You know what I mean? Oh yeah, you're going to need to have the shop take their laptop and flash this, and it's kind of crazy how, don't get me wrong, a lot of it has evolved for the good, right? Those computer assisted systems and all that stuff. All that stuff is good, and I'm actually going to talk more about that in a different video. But man, is it not nice just to get on the computer, ask somebody, a mechanic. He's probably got greasy fingers eating a ham and cheese sandwich, you know what I mean? And he just says, yeah, check your IPR valve, your nut came off, and just go out here, fix it, boom, you're done. Also, for my climate stuff inside the cab, you guys were talking about there's a vacuum line that goes here. You can see where I've put some heat shrink on it and I put that vacuum line on there. And it's corporate knowledge like that you get when you have an older vehicle, because there's tons of enthusiasts out there that, it's like, oh man, I'm a 7.3 expert. I'm a 12 valve Cummins expert. I'm a 24 valve Cummins expert. I'm a Hemi expert. I'm a big block Chevy expert. There's guys out there that know this engine like the back of their hand. And most of those guys are super nice and super willing to help you fix your problem. And that's the community of classic or older vehicle owners is really, now they're either going to eat their own or they're super nice, right? There's no in between. These guys are either going to say, oh, you're an idiot, blah, blah, blah. I can't believe you didn't know that your IPR valve nut come off. Or they're going to say, but that's only like 1 out of 10, right? Or 1 out of 100, I should say. The other 99 are going to be like, hey man, no problem, check your IPR valve. I think the nut may have come off of it or something. And so it's just, and then also, this is another thing, is you can't take, don't read emotions and comments on your, on your forums or whatever. So some guy may say, check your IPR valve, and you may read it as, check your IPR valve, so don't read into that kind of stuff, because these forums super help. The corporate knowledge in these computer forums or online forums, super, super helpful. The guys are just wonderful people. Guys and gals are wonderful people, and they're willing to help. But you should not be a receiver. You should be a giver and receiver. So once I put my question in that forum, I said, hey, I got this problem. And they answered the forum. They were like, hey, check your IPR valve. Then I followed up and I said, hey, you guys were right. My IPR valve, the nut was laying in the valley of my engine there. And that helps someone else out, right? That helps the next person that's having the same problem, because how many times have you been on an online forum and you read these forums in the comment sections, and some guy was like, hey, any follow-up on this? Or, hey, did that solve your problem? So it's important to go back, confirm that that issue, you know, what you did solved that issue, so that the next person can say or see, okay, that's, you know, Hank did this and it worked for him, let me try it. Because if you don't go back and you don't follow, you don't want to be a leecher, you know what I mean? You want to, these guys and gals are taking their time to kind of help you for free. It's nice of you to return the favor. Go back, tell them that it worked, or if you come up with something, add that to the forum or add that to the group that you're a member of. So if you're coming out and you say, oh, I've got a, I didn't notice that there's a bolt here on top of your alternator that takes a, you know, 10 millimeter socket head, just letting you guys know, whatever, right? Just, you know, give information, get information. It's a two-way street. So that's the third reason why owning a classic vehicle is the way to go, because that corporate knowledge is pretty awesome, pretty cool to experience. I've got two more reasons why you should own a classic truck. Let's go into reason number 4. So you got no computer stuff, you got parts availability and the cost, you got the online forums that are going to help you out. What's number 4? Number 4 is the quality of the build. You know, we as Americans, and I know a lot of you guys watch this overseas and things like that, you have pride in your country and pride in your nation. We have the same here in America. We have a lot of pride in things that are built in USA or made in USA. And back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, it was big, it was huge, it was, you know, all this industry was going on. And so you were getting cars, you were getting land yachts, man. You were getting cars that were 20 foot long, 40 foot long, 4 doors that were just, I mean, they weighed in at 6,000 pounds or whatever. And so it's a big chunk of metal. And so I think that's the 4th reason why you should buy a classic car, is because they're made out of good quality material, right? So this, obviously this is an aftermarket bed, but it's all steel. We've got the cab, all steel. You know, Ford trucks, they're making aluminum bodies now. They're making plastic fenders. They're making, everything is plastic and aluminum cheap type stuff, right? But all this, I mean, you're getting an accident with this thing and you're hurting the next guy, and you're probably gonna walk away from it. So having that feature of all that surrounded by all this big chunky heavy metal is good. Now, you know, obviously they went away from this kind of stuff because they went from, you know, with the airbags and the anti-lock brakes and the weight and the gas mileage, the fuel mileage and all this stuff. You know, some things, you know, got lighter, got more fuel efficient and all that stuff. But man, chunk of metal. And so they just don't make stuff like this anymore. You can't find a new truck. Yeah, your new F450 is going to pull 60,000 pounds or whatever, but this thing right here, man, it'll pull a house down, you know. So it's torqued real low and all that good stuff. So your classic vehicles, just the amount of steel that goes into it, just the quality of the build makes me want a classic vehicle versus a new vehicle. Now my wife drives a 2019 SUV. It's got all kind of creature comforts and things like that. It's a nice vehicle, but you know, if she gets in a wreck with that thing, if all the airbags don't deploy, who knows what's going to happen, which, you know, hopefully the computer's working to make all that stuff work, right? But all this stuff is just, you know, for a classic vehicle to be made with the quality. And this was, back in the 60s, 70s, the iron, the steel industry was going on, and there was a lot of things that were going on about made in USA and all this good stuff. So you'll see the pride in the craftsmanship and the workmanship of these vehicles when they put a sticker on the window that says this truck was made in Kentucky, or this truck was made in Tennessee, or wherever, Detroit, Michigan. Those guys that put that sticker on there, man, they were proud of this machine. They were proud of the vehicle that they had built, and they were proud that this thing had come out of this American plant. And so for us in America, having that pride in work and pride in ownership, that's a big deal for these classic type vehicles. And you can see when you get an old classic vehicle that's in good shape, all the lines are straight, all the parts just go on just just spot on. It's very nice. So having that steel, chunky, good hard quality parts, a lot better than some of the stuff that they make today. And so that's the fourth reason why you need to buy a classic truck versus one of these newfangled vehicles running around. Let's move on to our final point of why I think a classic vehicle is a better choice for you. So we talked about 4 reasons why. We talked about the parts, we talked about the computers, we talked about the online community, we talked about the quality of the build. Number 5 is they last longer. This is a 1995. The body on this thing has 350,000 miles on it. You've got trucks out there. I just saw an article in the paper where there's a gentleman that had 1 million miles on his Chevrolet. So they just last longer. This is a 28-year-old truck, right? My son is 22 years. My youngest son is 22 years old. So the truck is older than him, and this thing is out running around. I doubt that you see a 2020, 2022, 2023 truck 30 years down the road. In 2050, you're not going to see a 2025 F350 going down the road. So they just last longer. You can put more miles on them. And then, especially the cab and chassis. Now, this does have the engine on it has 140,000 miles on it. Don't know why that engine blew up when they replaced it, or I say blew up. I don't even know if it blew up. Don't know why they replaced the engine in it is what I'm trying to say. So, I mean, obviously things are going to break, but generally speaking, these older cars, you've seen videos. If this is the first time to my channel, welcome. If you haven't, but you've seen me and Wiley make videos. I mean, we crank up stuff that's been sitting in the woods for 50 years, And so back in the day, they made things that last longer. And it's no exception for these classic trucks and classic cars. They just last longer. And it goes back to point 4, right? The quality of the build. They used stronger steel. They used heavier gauge metal. They used more quality parts because it was, have you ever heard of the logistics triangle, right? It's good, fast, cheap. You can only pick 2. You can get it good and fast, but it's going to be cheap. You can get it fast and cheap, but it's not going to be good, right? So, back in the day, they were building good quality vehicles, and they just last. They just last long. And so, like if I need, like one day I'm going to go and I'm going to probably get a new doors or something for this if I want to replace the doors in it. Guess what? I can go to a junkyard and I can pull a piece out of the junkyard and it's going to work just fine because they just last longer. And I think that's a big point of why these older vehicles, why they have such enthusiasts, because they're easy to work on, and why people like them so much, because they know they're going to be around for a while. And so, and you always get, you drive up to an auto parts store or something, people's going to be like, oh man, that's a nice truck or whatever. And so that's always a cool thing. But those are the 5 reasons why I think an older vehicle or a classic truck or a classic car is is a better option than to buy some of this newer stuff that's on the market. Anyway, I hope you found some of these points helpful. If you have anything to add, leave a comment in the comment section below. We appreciate that. And we're going to take old Black Betty, and we're actually going to make a video of why you should buy a newer vehicle versus an older vehicle coming up here in the near future. So keep your notification bell turned on because we're going to play devil's advocate here in a little bit. But appreciate you guys watching. Go buy you a classic truck, take it around town, buy you a Dairy Queen ice cream cone or something. God bless you guys. We'll catch you in the next one.